So, to everybody, a very good morning. It's a real pleasure to open the first ever United Nations Model UN Youth Summit here in New York. As Model UN participants, you already have a lot of experience in researching and simulating our organization. But this isn't Model UN anymore. You are now at the real UN. And I'm very happy to welcome you here into these halls. Model UN has existed for more than 70 years. When it first came about, it didn't have really any links to the actual UN. That has changed. My office, the Department of Global Communications, has been making an effort to work with Model UNs. This meeting is one result. We've developed rules of procedure to bring Model UN more in line with the real UN. We've even organized Model UN conferences of our own, and our interactions with the Model UN world continue to change and evolve. We're very lucky that the Secretary General has agreed to spend a little time with us this morning. Because Model UN clubs and conferences mirror the work done inside this building, we want you to know what our priorities are. We want you to focus on issues that we care about, and you do too, obviously. We want you to move the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, into the center of your activities. And when I say activities, I'm not just talking about simulations or debates. I'm talking about going out into your neighborhoods and transforming them into better places to live. I'm talking about working to actually improve the lives of people in your communities. As Model UN students, you have the power to do great things, and the real UN will stand with you every step of the way. It is now my honor to introduce the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Well, dear friends and colleagues, once the Model UN is the UN, I think we can say colleagues. I have a very nice speech here, but I'm not going to read it. Because we are in trouble in the UN today. My generation has failed in a number of very important aspects that challenge the world today. The most obvious is climate change. We are facing a situation in which, as you are all aware, the situation on the ground is much worse than the predictions that were made. Temperatures are on the rise in an extreme way, both in land and in the seas. The concentrations of greenhouse gases in atmosphere are at the level of 3 million years ago. So it shows how fast this process has been in the recent past. And we are seeing everywhere glaciers melting much more quickly than expected. We are seeing the Arctic, in which very soon during summer there will be no ice over the Arctic if nothing happens. And when glaciers melt quickly, sources of water of very important regions of the world, like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, will be dramatically impacted. If you look at Bangladesh, rising sea levels, less water from the Himalayas, it will mean probably more than 20 million people being displaced. These are the risks that we are facing. Risks to public health. Heat waves are now killing lots of people in different parts of the world. And in Europe, where I live, namely in Southern Europe, we'll soon have the mosquitoes that are the ones that carry several very important diseases in the African continent. So there is a global threat that is becoming worse and worse. There was a very important report by the IPCC, which is the group of great experts at world level, and they said that it's absolutely essential not to let the temperatures go above a growth of 1.5 degrees in the end of the century. But we are not being able to reach that target. To reach that target, we would need to deeply transform energy, deeply transform mobility, deeply transform food, and the ways these things are provided in today's world. And we are not doing it. In Paris, there was a very important agreement that agreement fixed an objective. The objective is good, but the commitments made to reach that objective are not enough. They would lead to a growth of 3 degrees in the world temperature in the end of the century, which would be a total disaster. And those commitments are not being implemented in a moment in which, as you know, we are launching a summit whose objective is to make sure that countries make much stronger commitments to allow it to happen. But we don't see political will. My generation is still not sufficient, which is basically in power in the majority of the countries, is still not yet fully convinced of the need to act drastically in this regard. So you have two fantastic obligations. First is to tell in your countries, in your organizations, in the areas of the civil society where you are active, mobilize public opinion, mobilize the youth to confront those that have political responsibilities with the fact that they are failing in an essential aspect of the survival of our planet. And second, you will be in charge, very probably, your generation will be in charge soon. You will probably have to be even more drastic because things are going so slowly, and you will need to have an absolutely essential role in rescuing our planet. But then there are other areas in which your voice and your action can be very important. Globalization and technological change have brought enormous benefits to humankind. We all recognize that. I mean, wealth, trade, improvement in public health in general. Mortality rates have decreased, infant mortality have decreased. There are many benefits. But many people, we have this slogan, very important, to leave no one behind. The problem is that many people were left behind, and they're still being left behind in countries that are in big turmoil and where huge suffering is taking place, in regions that were specialized in some areas of production that is practically disappeared, or in professions, or in individual situations. And this has created enormous frustration in the world, and the level of inequality has grown dramatically. There is a handful of men, they're all men, that have as much wealth as half of humankind. And so that is another extremely important job that you have in front of you. My generation has failed to bring justice and equality. Your generation needs to correct that. We have an instrument, a tool, the Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, but this, of course, again, forces very drastic political choices at global level and at national level, and you have a very important role to play in relation to this. And then there is a third element I would like to underline to you. We are seeing in our societies diversity that is an enormous richness. I would not like to live in a society where everybody would be the same. Diversity, different cultural contributions makes our societies more vibrant, more interesting. But we are seeing diversity becoming, instead of a richness recognized by everybody, something many feel it is a threat. And we see xenophobia, we see racism, we see anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred. We had the Pittsburgh incident, we had the incident in New Zealand. And this is another absolutely essential battle. The present generation is giving rise to forms of extreme thinking and extreme political action, white supremacism, even neo-Nazi trends, that are creating division, that are creating hatred. Hate speech has been spreading like wildfire, namely through the internet, but also physical aggressions. I mean, we see Jewish or Muslim centers being destroyed. We see in other areas Christian centers being destroyed. And that is the level of mistrust, also in relation to political establishments, international organizations. This situation requires a huge investment, an investment in social cohesion, an investment in diversity, to make people feel that even if they are different from others, that they have their identity valued, but that they belong to the society as a whole, that the society as a whole accepts them, integrates them, respects them. And this is something that your generation will have to correct, because unfortunately the recent evolution has been quite negative. Now, The UN and its values, we can only deliver in relation to peace, we can only deliver in relation to sustainable development, and you can only deliver in relation to human rights if we are able to address root causes of the problems that each one of these three areas of activity of the UN are facing. And those root causes are in development, or in the absence of development, in unfair situation, in hatred, in lack of trust, in political establishments, in violations of human rights. And so, beyond the discussions that sometimes we see in the UN bodies, as in the political parliaments, that are discussions about, I mean, the foam over the water, we need to really go deep, look into the root causes of why things are wrong, and make sure that we act at the level of those root causes and we try to correct them. And there, your generation has a fundamental role to play, because, to be frank, my generation has largely failed. So we count on you. Please don't feel, oh, the UN is... no, the UN is like any other organization in the world. There are good and bad things, but what I know is that no country alone can solve today's problems. What I know is that without international cooperation seriously rooted in multilateral institutions, we will not be able to address the challenges of today. And so whether people like the UN or not, whether people think that the UN must be reformed in this or that aspect, and I'm the first to try to do it, we still need basically the UN as a fundamental tool for a better world. That's it.
Thank you very much for delivering such a spontaneous set of remarks, and they deserve to be met with a spontaneous reply, which is, take this message to heart. The Secretary General is really good at relaying this, and we need really an activist UN headed by Mr. Guterres. We all need to pull our weight, and we will get there, or we can get there. So now I believe I have to let you go, because you have other
there is today there is a very important commemoration or Remembrance Day, which is the genocide in Rwanda, and we are now doing that in the General Assembly, and of course I must attend and speak because it's something horrible that has happened, like the Holocaust, and things that might happen again if we really do not do what is needed to make this kind of hatred that is developing in many societies be effectively fought. So I'm going to apologize, but I have to go for this event to remember the genocide in Rwanda. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.